and reconstruction. One, women and persons with disabilities should publicly lead and promote gender equitable and universally accessible approaches during the response and reconstruction phases. And two, empowering women and persons with disabilities to publicly lead and promote gender equitable and universal access recovery and reconstruction is the key. And the DI-DRR guidelines in the National Disaster Management Guidelines, they are in line with this paradigm shift of strategies on Build Back Better. So I think as a sector, what we need to do is to, one, build our own understanding of these guidelines, of these principles of Building Back Better, and our existing laws and policies. I think they're brilliant. We have a very strong legislation in place, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016. We have DI-DRRs, which is quite comprehensive. I think there is a need for us to further look at these policies. But these policies, when I look at the policies that we have in our country, I think they're all right. The only problem is the implementation of these policies. We all know of the guidelines issued by the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities during the lockdown. I think they were quite comprehensive. The problem which we faced was in implementation. So I think there is a need that these policies and guidelines and the law are implemented. We need to look at disability in from a larger spectrum, the spectrum of disabled people with across disability, people with disability from gender's perspective, the intersectionality with other marginalized group. Very importantly, aging elderly and people with disability. I think this is very important as a sector that we can recognize that aging also brings disability in people, and it's a large population across our country and all over the world. I think as very strategically we have to align ourselves to these needs of the hour and find our way forward. In these new circumstances, I think the major hurdles that we are facing right now is education, how children and people with disability are being left behind because of this shift into digital mode, the use of more technology. But I'm a firm believer that that if you use technology in the right way, it will open up a new horizon for people with disabilities, a new horizon of people with disability, and only the sky will be the limit. What we need to do is to ensure that people with disabilities are not left behind when we are trying to build our infrastructure of providing people with such technologies or systems to include them into the new way of education in digital. Likewise, when we talk about education, the policies, it must be, heard it a million times now that the work from home business just happened in one day. People aligned themselves for working from home, but when it happened for the whole world, for the majority of the world, in one day, everybody aligned themselves to work from home. But these are the things which we need to consider as a reasonable accommodation, as a part of policies across board for people with disability, to enable them to to pursue their livelihood that they want to in the areas that they are working on or no matter where they come from. One can go on and on. We have a very galaxy of people who are going to speak here on this various important topic. I just wanted to check if Mr. Ravinder Singh has joined us. Asifa, has Ravinder Singh ji has joined us?
No, he has not.
Oh,
We are trying to follow up with his office.
right. Okay. So, so till he joins, I would like to mention everybody that towards the end of the session, we will have um, questions from the audience. They may you have to keep your audio and video off, but please put your questions in the chat box if you have any question for any of the panelists, and we'll be happy to answer. And we may also respond to you over email if you want to email us your questions and you're not come up with the question right away. We are also recording this session, so this is will be available on our website and our social media handles. It is right now live on YouTube. Those who may not be able to um, uh, join this webinar directly may access it through our YouTube channel. So, I really didn't wanted to get into the details of the findings of our report on the lockdown one, which happened during March, and then that is when we did this report. But the kind of problems which came across from people across the country, most of them wanted pension. They wanted some financial assistance from the government. The announcement was made, and major problem which I thought was there and which came out very clearly from across boards, that no communication which was issued from the government of India was in accessible format, which created a lot of confusion amongst people. And various organizations who are working in disabled with people with disability and otherwise came forward, used their innovative ways. We ourselves set a helpline. I think there was a lot of collaboration which happened from across board, across disability organizations, uh, and and uh, and we were able to really respond in a in a very short time. We were able to organize a lot of stuff amongst ourselves and across the country. Some very positive stories have come up. It has taught us to be resilient. It has taught us to work together, and I think it's for time to come. The use of technology would really make us even much more productive the who we are, and in ways to access our services and rights. I am personally looking forward to listen to all the panelists myself and learn from each one of them. It must be very early for Mr. Chapel Kasnavis to come, and thank you so much for taking time out and logging this early for this webinar. I don't know if Mr. Ravinder Singh has joined. Asifa, did you check with him?
Yes, we are calling.
Okay. Now, may I request panelists if they can quickly introduce themselves for everybody if I may request Chapal Saab, if you could just introduce yourself, and then Radhika ji and Abraham, Matthew Joseph ji, please. If you could unmute Chapal Saab.
Thank you, Arman, and good to see some old faces, known names. Yeah, and it's a real pleasure to come back to my own country, own people, and to talk about older persons with disabilities. In fact, this is what I was talking for quite some time at different forum, and that's what I want to. So I'm super busy this week because the aging and disability, these are the two my favorite subjects. And as I'm getting older, so I'm crossing my border, so going more towards the aging mode. So I'll share some of my talks, but some of you know me or some of you don't know that I lead the WHO's World Health Organization's global program on assistive technology and medical devices based in Geneva. But happy to be with you. Thank you, Marman.
Thank you so much. Matthew?
Thank you, Arman. My name is Matthew Joseph. I am the country director for the American India Foundation. I'm based in India. For us, working with people with different abilities has been one of our earliest programs. We started off in 2005, and until date, we have covered, we have reached out to almost 140,000 youngsters with skilling and access to employment, and amongst them, about 16,000 people with disabilities. We are spread across the country. We have a large number of partners who work with us. We are very proud of the committed partnerships that we have built up over the last decade and a half. Sitting here, I can just think back on the last few years when we were having these celebrations at major events. We were at the India Gate with thousands of people listening to us, celebrating. We had fun. We had
I know.
participants making all sorts of fun activities, and it was like a celebration in real. And in 1 year, look at the changes. Not even 1 year, in 9 months, we have a completely different world out here. And we are trying to cope. We are learning. We don't have any playbook to go by, but human beings are so innovative that we have showcased that we can rise in the face of any such challenge and come out with solutions that are effective and create change. So I'll talk more about what I wish to say in when my time comes, but thank you so much, Arman, for giving this opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much, Matthew. It's a very difficult time. I am personally, I got up this morning with the thought of India Gate and how thousands of people gathered there each year after year. Radhika ji, quickly, you, and then Ravindra ji has joined. We will come to him.
Thank you, Arman, and good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here today. As Matthew Joseph said, we are missing being at India Gate today. And it's almost become like a Bible thing for us that, every year we have to be there. And but I'm sure next year we will be there. I'm Radhika Al-Qazi, and I work in Delhi largely, but also in other states, mainly in the urban slum areas with children and people with disabilities and their families. And this whole period, we have seen at very close range what has happened to many of our families who have actually tumbled into poverty and much more. I'll talk about it more later. I think we can start the program now, but I'm looking forward to hearing others speak and a good discussion. I'll talk about children with disabilities and women with disabilities later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Radhika ji. Very warm welcome, Ravindra Singh ji. Mr. Ravindra Singh is the CEO of Skill Council for Persons with Disabilities. I would request you to please start your session, and you are speaking on skill building of persons with disabilities and elderly for resilient and sustainable economic recovery. Over to you, Ravindra Singh ji.
Thank you, Arman. I'd at the outset like to thank Arman for inviting me to this session. It was at a very short notice, but I did not want to miss this session. And there's a parallel session that is going on, so I made my presentation there and I have dropped out for some time so that I can be part of this discussion. I would love to be part of the entire discussion, but unfortunately I have to get back to the panel discussion at about 12 o'clock there. So Arman, again, thank you very much for inviting me.
It's an honor. Thank you so much for keeping up with us, and it means a lot. Thank you so much.
Matthew, Rati, and Radhika ji, and all the other participants present, wishing you a very warm good morning. And I hope everybody is keeping safe in these COVID times. Skilling has taken a new turn in the pandemic era. People are progressively moving to online technology and various other methods of doing business, and skilling also is taking the same route. So just to give a quick update, we are a council that works very closely with the cross-section of industries to identify the job roles that can be suitable for persons with various disabilities. And I will not call them exactly disabilities because everybody has got a very special ability. It's not that anybody is disabled in any way. I've been interacting and interfacing with a wide spectrum of industry, and wherever I've been speaking to them and trying to understand how our boys and girls are doing when they are placed with the industry, everybody's speaking volumes of laurels about them. Their productivity level is high, their discipline is high, they are good team players. Everything is very positive. It's kind of making a good business sense for industry to start hiring persons with disability. And I will not call them persons with disability, I will call them persons with special ability, because the difference is only that how a person learns something. If you look at regular children also, there are say about 20, 30 children in the class. Everybody is taught in the same manner. Everybody doesn't top the class. There will be some who are doing very well in something, some are doing very well in the others. So everybody's got their special abilities, and that is what we need to channelize. The Skill Council attempts to identify the mechanisms of how we are going to address the learning needs and build the learning outcomes for these candidates, and then roll out the training programs. So we have developed certain expositories, and which are broadly covering 14 out of the 21 identified disabilities, and approximately 82% of the population gets covered there. Two challenges that are emerging when I'm looking at skilling is, one of the biggest challenges, as Radhika ji was mentioning, is that progressively the urban poor and the rural poor is sinking below the whatever baseline they were 12 months back because of the pandemic. And that is putting a different kind of challenges in how we are going to take these trainings forward. We are progressively looking at taking the trainings to the rural areas so that the training centers become more accessible, closer to their geographies, and they start working there. We're trying to bring out technologies and tools, how we are going to equip them to come for these trainings. Many a times we have found that a lot of these children within the family also, they're at times discriminated. There are 4 children. One of them is unfortunately a special child. Resources allocated to him would not be in the same proportion that it is allocated to the rest of the children. What we are submitting to the government, and the government has agreed also, is that whenever we start a training program, there has to be a foundation course or a bridge course preceding the training program, so that we're able to bring these children up to the base level where we can then start imparting the skills training. So we're working on those. We're working very closely with the industry from 2 perspectives. We're trying to identify the champion industries, the early starters, early movers, to identify who have started hiring persons with special abilities, and trying to understand what are the good things that are happening there and transition it to the other industries. What we're also trying to do is that we are trying to convince the industry that the hiring of PWDs is not a social act that you're doing, that you hire somebody and then you dump him somewhere without a relevant kind of a job the person is having. You need to understand that what is the person capable of doing, find a slot from him, and groom him. One of the challenges that comes is how do you integrate these people into when they are getting into the industry? So we are developing a job role called job coaches for inclusion. The person who's working as a job coach for inclusion will function as an interface between the special people who are working with the industries, person with the special abilities, and his peer group, the supervisors, the rest of the company, so that integration happens more smoothly. The person doesn't feel left out. Person has a voice in the organization where the person can express what the person is wanting and the challenges that the person is having. That helps in integrating the entire activity in a much better manner. We're also trying to explain to the industry that, look, when you are hiring these people, just don't hire them for a particular job role. You need to start now thinking that how can I, look at a career progression for these children. So like I was talking about, the skill development component, if you look at the entire gamut of skill building happening from the foundation programs and such trainings at school level, going up to the managerial and senior managerial training programs. So the skill training is just a small part or a small segment that gets addressed. We're trying to take the foundation training to the school. We're encouraging a lot of schools and a lot of governments to start this program. State government of Rajasthan, Gujarat has shown a very keen interest. We're trying to get other schools also to start these programs and integrate into their Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan that is there, the vocational training program, bring in the PWD component also into that. On the other side, we are encouraging industries that, look, you have a organizational or leadership development programs that you have. Why don't you start looking at building a specialized program for these special candidates? It may be possible that you have just 5, 10, 20 candidates to start with. But progressively, these numbers will keep going up as you realize that these people are just like anybody else. Only thing that differs them from others is the communication style. That's all. So with that, we are hoping that we'll have a further and a stronger integration into the entire value chain of the industry. But everybody can't get a job in the industry. When you look at the rural ecosystem, it becomes very difficult for somebody to kind of relocate from the wherever the person is staying and go into a geography where the jobs are available. So what do we do there? Many times we see that a large number of our special youth are into some kind of a self-employment mode. And the self-employment mode is not by choice. Many times it's forced on them because as they progressively become adult, the families expect them to start earning some livelihoods and start building something. So at the council, we are developing a special entrepreneurship development program, which we will be dovetailing between with the skills training for a particular trade. The entrepreneurship training will enable the person to plan out his or her business in the sense that he can start planning his product, he can start planning his production, he can start planning his supply chain and see how he can do it. He can start doing his financial management more effectively. He's able to start understanding the statutory requirement and see how we can start fulfilling those, the legal and the statutory requirements. We are dovetailing mentorship into this entrepreneurship program because just by doing the program and leaving them in the field will not help. So we're building also a pool of mentors who can help them. And I expect that over a period of time when we have these entrepreneurs going up, they themselves will start becoming mentors for the other special people. So that's what we are looking at from the other side of the employment opportunity, not the wage employment, but the self-employment and growing into the entrepreneurship kind of a thing. So that's what we are working on. And we hope that together, Arman will be able to achieve significant success and look forward to everybody's support on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ravindra ji. I think you have a major role to play in times to come in this present times of crisis amongst people with disability, where livelihood has become a major challenge for everybody. And I think the first people who are left behind are the people with disability. So I think there is a need to bring a special focus on elderly people with disability, people who are at the middle level of their midlife thing in their career, and it doesn't matter whatever to do. So we look forward to more interactions and working together in this area. Thank you so much, Ravinder Singh ji, for taking out time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arman. And Preeti, thank you so much for supporting with the sign language. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, may I request Mr. Chapel Custom-Base to kindly address us. Mr. Chapel will be talking on addressing the rights and needs of older persons with disabilities. Chapel Saab, welcome again. I really like your yellow tie and the blue jacket. It's in line with the disability theme and the color. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Over to you, Chapel Saab.
Yeah, can you allow me to share my screen, please?
Yes, Asifa.
Yes, sharing. Yes. It's there?
Allow him to share his screen, or you
Yeah.
want to share the. Is this okay, Chapel Saab, if they run the PPT for you?
Oh, yeah, fine. You want to run? Very good. My job is less. Thank you. One job is less. So thank you, Arman, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you to all of you. And as I said, that addressing the rights and needs of older person with disabilities is a new big challenge. And we all have to keep it in mind that everybody is getting old by day, by minute. Next slide, please. So we have to look at the aging, disability, and demographic trends. In last century, most disabled people or non-disabled people used to die early. But in this century, people with their disability, with their health conditions, are living longer. And as we all grow older, our different functional domains gets affected. So whatever I am saying today, many of you may not feel it, but if you take a note and after 20, 30 years, you will see whatever I'm saying makes some sense. Because more we age, more we become functional capacity gets reduced. It's quite often starts with a vision, sometimes with mobility, sometimes then a hearing. We say more you live, you have to pay more taxes. Next, please. So even mean age of disability is changing. When I came to the sector, the most disabled people I used to see are the children with disabilities. Since our country was full of polio at that time, polio and cerebral palsy. But now if you see, if you even visit any centers, it is not dedicated for children, it's mostly elderly disabled people. So we are seeing a complete strange shift on the mean age of disability, which is gradually going more towards older population. So we also see a particular trend, very young as the CP, children with cerebral palsy or congenital anomalies, young, more spinal cord injuries or amputees, mostly due to road traffic injuries. And more older people with disabilities like diabetes and stroke. And all need assistive care and technology. Next. Next, please. So aging and disability is made for each other. As we all grow older, all will experience disability. So it's not the same how it used to happen in last century. It will be quite different in this century. So next. So we say more age, more assistive products. Here is my friend's dad. He uses 9 assistive products, but which keeps him active, independent every day. So on average, in the high income countries, people use 3 to 5 assistive products, and the number gets increased as they grow older. Next. But older persons with disabilities having new challenges. Here is my friend, David Constantine, founder of Motivation. So he had a spinal cord injury 25, 30 years ago. And he used to go around the world with his wheelchair. He never cared anything. And he develops assistive technology program in many countries. But if you see David now, and if you talk to David now, it is no more his spinal cord injury is bothering him much, but it's more bothering his vision, hearing, and hand functions, which are gradually decreasing with the age. And for others who are non-disabled, that's not a very big deal. Means if you have a vision loss or if you have a reading difficulties, you go to the shop and put a glasses. But David's hand functions are not good enough to put glasses. And his hand functions are not good enough even to put contact lenses. So he is facing this challenge much more than any other older people. So older person with disabilities, when they will get more old, they will have more challenges. And that's where we need to see how Arman, as he ages, his abilities, his efficiency should not get affected because he doesn't have the technology. So that's how the technology comes into the picture, and especially for older person with disabilities. Next. But there is a huge divide between South and North when it comes to access to technology. So in here, we see many older people are on their own, they're doing everything. But in our part of the world, they're very dependent life. And even I have seen, whether it's a rich or poor, the houses are built in such a bad way. And the toilets, people have no concept of that, one day they can get older, one day they can become disabled, and they need a better non-slippery floor. Means this mindset of the shining floor, tiles, but these are all death traps or disability traps. And even a small grab bar, you cannot see most Indian toilets. So they use the tap to hold and stand up and fall and have a hip fracture. So hip fracture, as in the older community, in the developing countries, especially in the bathrooms and the toilets, are quite huge and we don't address. And I cannot believe when you can build a house and a flat or apartment so expensive, you cannot afford to buy a grab bar. This is all the difference of understanding. Next. So to mitigate the gap between North and South, or to mitigate the divide, so on 2014, 4 July, WHO established this GATE initiative, Global Cooperation on Assistive Technology, just to implement Article 32 of the convention, where it asks for a global cooperation, exchange of technology, transfer of knowledge. And since then, next. So since then, what we have done, we have made a paradigm shift of the whole assistive technology. And we are saying assistive technology is not for only people you perceive for a blind or for a wheelchair user or a deaf. It's for almost everybody. It's more for disability, for non-communicable disease, communicable disease, leprosy, injuries. And the major buyers, major procurers of the assistive products are older people. And we repositioned this whole thing as an assistive products, as a health products, and as an essential health technology, and as important as medicines, vaccines, medical devices, diagnostics, and assistive products. So this is what we designed an AT ecosystem based on 5P. It has to be people-centered. Everything what we do is by the people, for the people, of the people. It has to be people-centered. Policy, products, personnel, and provision. In absence of one P, other Ps will not work. And that's what we are time and again hammering, that you have to follow the ecosystem. You may have the best product, best trained people, but it will not give the benefit to the people who need these services. Next. So we talk about policy beyond healthcare as usual, means we are introducing a concept called assistive care. Is a human or technological assistance to perform daily activities in the case of any impairment and or functional decline. So we need personal assistance, we need technology, we need a better environment to remain in our optimum condition until our last breath. Next. So in WHO, we developed a assistive technology assessment tool. So in any population, we can measure what is the need of what kind of assistive products and what kind of services available. And this is just an example of one country's statistics, what different products they need in a given population. And this helps us to plan the national, regional, or a district level program so that we can do the procurement accordingly based on the need. And WHO and UNICEF now have developed a catalog where these most essential assistive products is the first time is going to happen in next year, 2021. We launched this product on 20th January. So this is the first time it will happen that WHO and UNICEF will procure these products and give supply to the countries in need. Next. So we are also seeing that how we can train the more people, because knowledge is not there. Still many people do not know. And many people go to the local chemist shop or pharmacy to buy a pair of crutches or a wheelchairs or this, and nobody tells them how to make use of them and whether that's the right product for them. So in next year, WHO is hosting its WHO Academy, and this training of assistive products is one of the first 5 courses which will be launched in the WHO Academy. So we want to transfer the basic knowledge to the user, to their caregivers, the primary care health workers, and community-based rehabilitation workers. Next. So we are also developing an assistive technology service provision model. And most places still it is available in the cities on the tertiary level. So how we can ensure the basic, most essential services are available at the grassroots level, community level, through a one-stop AT center. This is how it is done in Norway, how it is done in most high-income countries. So the people don't have to travel more than 5 to 10 kilometers to access assistive devices. And as the need increases, they go at the higher level, but most services are available at the local municipality, local panchayat level. Next. So here is an example of Norway Assistive Technology Center of a provincial center just for 1-2 lakh population. People can, I'm sure, will say, yes, Norway can afford, so they can have this. My question is, okay, they can afford such center for 1-2 lakh population. Why cannot we afford such center for 1-2 crore population? Why cannot we have a regional or state level AT center in every state? So I'm hoping for that day when the states in India will wake up and will start developing such centers. Next. We are also working for innovative solution. The traditional technology, traditional products, all has its own limitation. Many are outdated. And so we are looking for, and as we say that, as people get older, and this whole cognitive area is very neglected in the developing world. So as their products. But if you talk to the industries leaders in the West, most industries are developing on 3 areas: cognition, low vision, and mobility. These are the future needs. And we have to really come with the new products, new solution. Next. So in the 6 years of our existence, we created all these initiative, 80 scale, 80, 20, 30. We brought UK government, US, Norway, all big governments together on this initiative. And in this square, we already have $100 million and to procure assistive products in the next couple of years. And we really look at India, and especially you say Atmanirbhar Bharat, but we really need India to give us these products so that we can take it not only in India, outside India. So I said, India should go beyond their boxes and like Bharat Nirbhar Vishwa, so that, because we need India and China, these are the 2 countries who can supply us the products what we need. Next. So, but all this has derailed due to COVID, as Arman was saying, and as many of you are experiencing. COVID has changed everything. It exposed us completely. It made us naked. It shows us how backward we are. So, but what we also see that, especially in countries like India, still we have a family, still we have a community. How we can take advantage of the family, community members, and the technology so that ensure that everybody's life is optimally utilized. Next. So we are introducing the new concept of tele-AT, and this tele-AT model, we are also trying to address some fundamentals where the family users are not just the passive recipient of the services. They are the equally designer and the contributor of the services. So he said optimum use of technology and available human resources to provide and maintain assistive technology at home. Home delivery. If pizza can be delivered at home, why assistive products cannot be delivered at home? So we have to really understand, if I can get a taxi using Uber apps, why cannot I access an assistive products using a Uber app or the Amazon service? Next. So every disaster brings new opportunities. So we are going local and embracing digital. We are going more local than ever before. and developing new generation of products and provision system, tele-AT. So we are working on task shifting, how the professionals' task can be shifted towards the family members, to the caregivers, to the local resources, making optimum use of artificial intelligence, 3D printing, cloud platform, and digitally or remotely supported assistive care. So we are connecting people with technology, environment, both digitally and physically. That's what we say new model for the new normal. Next. So some key points for all of us to remember. We are not talking about 2% or 3% disabled population, what India government declares. We are talking about much larger population which needs assistive technology. And keep it in mind, everyone will need assistive technology at some point of time. It is no more about others. It is about all of us. More age, more assistive products, and most essential for the older persons with disabilities. So we need to have people-centered, home-centered, community-centered, technology-based services, which will become the new model of service delivery for new normal. This is what I say very often and my most favorite. The future is digital and future is aging. Nobody can escape from it. So it's not a favor. Anything good for disability, good for aging, good for everybody. Keep it in mind, nobody is doing a favor. It's an investment for everybody, even for yourself, your own family members. So anything good for disability, good for aging, good for everybody. WHO estimates AT sector is $1 trillion industry, $1 trillion industry. I really wonder where is India's share? How much India is having the share of this? When India will see AT is also a product for their domestic consumption as well as their export market. So next, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And here is our GATE community. So if any of you interested to know more about us, log in, get yourself registered so you'll keep on all the information what we do around the world. More than 1,600 organizations and individuals from 120 countries are the member of the GATE community. So we'll be more than happy to have more people from India. We count on India. We need India. Help us to reach to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chappal Saab, and thank you for finishing it on time. There's no other better way to summarize your session when you say future is digital, future is aging, and you cannot escape it. I think very thought-provoking session that you had. I look forward to interacting more with you, and all of us will learn as we go along in this journey. Thank you. Now, may I request Radhika ji to please speak, and she's speaking on ensuring protection of right of women and children with disabilities, integral to resilient and sustainable recovery. Radhika ji, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Arman. And as Chapal said, the future is aging. I'll start with the present, which is the children to whom we need to give the head start. And I'll also talk about women with disabilities. I was looking yesterday at the UNICEF policy brief on children and what are the predictions that UNICEF makes. This is October 2020, so very recent. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to link it to what has happened with children with disabilities in our country and what I think could be some of the things that we can do to build back better. The policy brief says approximately 150 million additional children are living in multidimensional poverty without access to essential services. Of this, as we know, many are going to be children with disabilities. Many more families of children with disabilities and disabled people and women will be on the edges of poverty because of the coronavirus, the pandemic that has hit us. As we have seen that in our own country, many families dropping into poverty and being in extreme distress in the last few months of this year. Of this year. Many more families will have children who are at risk of impairment because of the kind of poverty that many families have slipped into. Families that were perhaps managing earlier on their own in whatever way have now gone into distress situations. And in that, it's going to affect the child in a way that we will see that many more families will have children who are at risk of an impairment. And that's very important for us to take cognizance of. We also know in our work with children and families of children with disabilities that every family tries for the best for their child. Families come from rural areas to urban areas looking for resolutions and supports for their child. But when that does not happen, very often families become tired and they give up. We will see in this coming month, as we are seeing now in these coming months, that families may become more tired. They may become more tired more easily because the battle that they are now facing is on many different fronts and is intensified. And therefore, there is a very important need for support. And for many families, which we may also see and are likely to see, that search for rehabilitation for their child with disabilities may not even begin. And that are some of the things that the effects of poverty, are so global that we cannot any longer act in silos. At a time like this, we cannot say, I only look at education, or I only look at this, and I only look at that. There has to be a global understanding, and the work that is done from the state as well as from civil society like us must be holistic. We cannot, for example, today ignore food security for children with disabilities. We cannot ignore that and only focus on education. So what do we do in these situations that we are likely to see and we are already seeing? Firstly, we do have some affirmative action. Yes, there are entitlements for people with disabilities, the disability pension, the other entitlements. Not many, I would say, but there are some. In this period of time, what we need to see, if you look at the entitlements, but you know that only about 50% or a little over 50% of people with disabilities are accessing these entitlements. For example, the disability pension that is supposed to be given. In the period of crisis, states had given, 2 months or a little more of that pension for people with disabilities and their families. But the crisis is not over, even though we have a vaccine today, and that's a wonderful news, but the crisis is not over for many families. So we have to ensure that disability supports are continue to be given to families on a larger scale. However, if we look at children with disabilities, ASTHA, my organization, we reached out to over 2,000 families of people with and children with disabilities during the early periods of the lockdown. And we asked everybody, do you have a disability certificate? Do you get the disability pension? Are you connected to the PDS system? Because that was the need at that time. And we found that children under 8 years old, they were not at all connected with the disability pension or certification. So if we look at the data that we have, the very on people and children with disabilities accessing pensions or any other situation like that, If we look at children, we will find that it is much, much less. And that's only natural because families only go for these, for the certification and pension, probably much later. The early years are spent much more in trying to understand what has happened to the child. So when we are building back better, we need to look at children. We need to look to see there are many, many children who don't have these supports. Therefore, we need to find the children. One of the things that we found during the lockdown and even today, if we move out from our small organizations and our small areas of work, where do we find that child? Even if you were to support the child, we have to be able to find where she is. And there is no way at present in our country to be able to find that child. So we need to build systems where we can track children, all children, including children with disabilities. We need to work at a local level and at a community level. At a community level, at a local level, if we are able to go through the institutions that are present at the community level, even though they may not be working with the child, they do know where the child is. For example, the Anganwadis in Delhi know exactly where there is the child with disabilities, where is the older person with disabilities, the Anganwadi workers. They may not know how to work with this child. The CBR programs in our countries, the DPOs in our countries, the ASHA workers, these are the people who at present do know where children and people with disabilities are. And we need to now, at this point of time, which is a crisis time, we need to work with them and find and work at a local level and be able to provide supports. Even if money supports are not available at this point of time. And I think this whole pandemic and the humanitarian crisis that we are still going through has taught us it is not enough for us just to double a disability pension, because half our people and children are just not getting it. We have to think differently in this situation. And that is something that we need to do perhaps even now. We need to track, we need to build systems where the tracking has to happen for children with disabilities. We need to be cognizant of the fact that many, many people in our country have left the cities and gone back to their villages. For example, in Bihar, about 1 crore people have come back to Bihar. There will be children with disabilities, women with disabilities, persons with disabilities amongst those people. And therefore, strategies have to be, for once they go back to those places, any systems that they had set up here will not be there. And therefore, we need to set up systems. We need to look very closely amongst people who have migrated back and be able to provide the supports right there and then. Even the pension and certification and all these things, we need to break away from the system we have at present and think afresh. Another thing that the UNICEF says is an additional 1.2 million children, 56,700 mothers could die in 6 months due to disruption in basic interventions based on a worst case scenario. They're talking about the world, but let's talk about India and let's talk about children with disabilities. For kids with disabilities, as others, rehabilitation services have stopped. Medical intervention, therapeutic intervention, development intervention, everything has stopped. Even today, 7 months, 8 months after, we are not in a situation where families feel that they can go back to the hospital for the intervention that was stopped. Even today, people are no longer in a situation where medication can be taken, long-term medication, for example, epilepsy. Even today, we know that there are situations where children who are living with thalassemia and have to travel, for example, to Delhi from small towns in Haryana are unable to come to get their medication. So in that situation, what do we do to build back better? I think one of the more long-term situations is that we we work towards rehabilitation services being available at the primary health care and at the primary levels close to people's homes. Now, there is a move. We know there is an international move that rehabilitation services, and as Chapal just said, uh, assistive devices and rehabilitation services are important for large numbers of people. And we, India, we need to push that today rehabilitation services become part of our primary healthcare systems so that all children and people with disabilities also, who till now have to travel at least say 40, 50 miles or kilometers in rural areas to get any support, get any kind of rehabilitation support, who also in the urban areas may be close to organizations and hospitals where tertiary care situations where rehabilitation is available, but often don't know how to negotiate those areas. So we need to push. I understand India is the chair of the WHO and can push, and we need to advocate with our government that this becomes a reality for us. The other major thing that we have looked at and seen is, and as the UNICEF policy brief says, 132 million people may go hungry in 2020. Of that, 36 million may be children. And this is where, in India, where we have children with disabilities being on the peripheries of institutions for childcare, for example, Anganwadis, for example, schools. As you know, that the largest group of children who are out of school are children with disabilities. So all the food-based programs that are there for children, this is a big barrier that we are facing and that we are going to face in the coming months also. Hunger. When we find out linkages with the PDS systems, they are very poor for children with disabilities. In our study, we found that roughly 30% of the families, and this was just like a random sample from all over Delhi, were actually connected to the PDS or had a ration card that which they could go, whereas actually children and people with disabilities should be getting some kind of, they should be getting this on first. So here we have to consider what are the strategies that are going to be most important for us. Do we join, should it be universal for all children, and children with disabilities should come into it? Should we have universal supports, or should there be something separate for children with disabilities? I'm feeling more and more, and I think we need to discuss this in the disability sector, that services should be universal, and we should push for universal services so that they reach each and every child, including the child with disabilities. But within that, we need to look and see that the specific requirements of the child are taken care of. Coming to school, we find that 1.6 billion children and young people have been affected by school closures. Many do not have internet access at home. This is what the UNICEF policy brief says. We know in our country, we have many reports saying children with disabilities are facing huge difficulties in internet access and in accessing education today. But I'll just give you one thing. The RTE Forum, the National RTE Forum of India, recently came up with a study which looked at the gendered impact of school closures in our country. And one of the things that they said, which we need to really worry about, is they said when they asked children in 6 states of India that, are you looking forward to going back to school? There were many children and many more girls here who were not sure that they would get back to school. And why is that? Because these were families which were facing a cash crunch or food insecurity. And therefore, many children were at work. Girls were in house care, in caring, in doing chores for the home. This is what the RTE Forum found for girls and boys. that they're not even sure that they will get back to school. And I think that should be a warning and an alarm bell for us, because children with disabilities, our experience, our data shows, are the first to drop out from school. So our work at present has to be to see that the child who is in school remains in school. That's the first thing we have to do. And then look at all the other children who are not in school. If you think of girls with disabilities, and I think this is where I'd like to just take on and say a little bit about girls and women with disabilities. Even before the pandemic, very few girls with disabilities were in school as compared to boys. And that just shows us that, I think that we ourselves have thought very little of girls and women with disabilities. In every data that we have today, we must firstly have a very clear understanding of what is happening with girls and women with disabilities. That is one of the first things we have to do. To be able to build back, we have to know what are they facing. You see, women are, the roles that we as women play are those of carers, of homemakers, of looking after families. And women with disabilities are no different. And this role has come under severe threat at present because of the difficulties, the grave distress that large number of families are facing. We have to be very cognizant of the fact that we do not allow our girls to get into trafficking, that child labor, which is already increasing, does not happen. And let us not forget that this can happen easily to children and women with disabilities as well as it happens to any other. So building back better, to me, I think, as to end what I'm trying to say here is, we need to work together today as a disability sector with all other sectors. We need to think together in the long term. We should not work in an isolated manner only, because we need the plans for children to include all children, including children with disabilities. We need the plans for women to include all women, including women with disabilities. This is an opportunity also to work together, so that when we talk about inclusion, it becomes more and more of a reality. One of the big issues that we've had in our country is the discourse around disability, which has remained extremely medical, and we need to start changing that now. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Over to you, Arman.
Thank you so much, Radhika ji. I think it could not have been said in a better way. I think you have really highlighted very important issues around children and women with disability. Thank you so much. As always, we look forward to your support. And Radhika ji has been leading our core group on education after the NEP and trying to find new ways to work around inclusion of children with disability, and so that they're not left behind after this fantastic new education policy. Thank you so much, Radhika ji. Now, may I request Mr. Matthew Joseph, the country director for America India Foundation, to kindly speak. Matthew.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Manali. It's a pleasure for AIF to be partnering with you. It's been several years now that we have joined hands with you to celebrate this important occasion. And I'd be remiss if I do not acknowledge the support from our donor, the Sadia Foundation, that has helped us partner with you and your organization and reach out to all the people that we do. Earlier, I was just referring to the efforts and the reaction that we had when the coronavirus started off in early March. as you can imagine, most of the classroom-led trainings that we were doing for the program that we were running, which is called the Ability-Based Livelihoods Empowerment Program, we had to close down almost all the programs. All the classes were off. The lockdown made sure that the trainees were back in their homes. We responded to the COVID pandemic with a spate of activities. On one side, we reacted to the emergency needs of almost 17 states in the country. At the time, the need was medical equipment were lacking in hospitals, PPE kits were lacking. We reached out to almost like 17 states with various support in terms of supplies, and also reached out to almost 450,000 people with basic support, including rations and personal protection kits for individuals, basic face masks and others. But at the same time, it was always on our minds that people with disabilities have been more affected than the rest of the people. And we made sure that my teams reached out to our partners, and we could provide some sort of support to all the trainees who are facing challenges, including basic challenges like rations and protection gear and such things. So I'm happy that we are past that phase and we are entering a rebuilding and a reconstruction phase, which AIF calls as rebuilding lives. And during this time, when we seek to set up our classes again, when we start to engage with students or trainees who are undergoing different trades that we are supporting, the challenges have been immense. There's no doubt that we had to face some of the biggest challenges that we never have ever seen. But as I said, technology came to our rescue, and we've been able to commence classes for them online using various available technologies like Zoom and Google and various other technologies. We also reached out to candidates with equipment that they could attach to their mobile phones so that remote classes could be conducted in many places. This challenge has affected people differently, even the differently abled in a very different way when you look at urban areas, rural areas, and the disability that they have. But I must say that there is a silver lining to the whole pandemic that hit us. It made people very sensitive, people who never bothered about what it could be to live in a different world, people who are in positions of power and people who can make decisions. They are now aware of how different the world can be for people. And this sensitivity, I think, is the time. This sensitivity should lead to people being more open to change. And when we say build back better, I definitely feel this is the time for governments, for people, for companies, and others to be reached out to and told about the different challenges that people with disabilities face and how the new normal, the normal that is, we are calling it the new normal, how that new normal can be made much better. So our target for the next 1 year is to reach 100,000 people with jobs, with access to employment, with opportunities for self-employment. This is a real challenge, and we look at our partners and all those in the sector to engage with us, to dialogue with us, to help us with ideas on how we can do more than what we are planning, so that more lives are actually supported during this period. We also see that technology has its limitations. while we've seen many companies come forward and announce that they're going to have all their staff working from home, which is a blessing in disguise for people with disabilities who do not have to travel long distances or commute. But at the same time, some sectors cannot function in such a situation, or they haven't still found a way to function in such environment. I can only remember a visit to Mumbai where I interacted with trainees who were visually challenged, who were working in a restaurant and providing some of the best services that that customers could ever have. I can only think about what would they do? What would people who are dependent on face-to-face engagement during their work? How will they survive? Do they need upskilling to something that could put them behind a computer and perform to the best of their abilities? Is there a need for reskilling them into something else that today's world requires? These are some of the questions that my team and my partners are thinking and trying to implement in some measures across the country. We also we understand that the older people are much affected by this pandemic. Many people who thought that they could survive by themselves, that they could live out their senior lives with relative independence, they find themselves challenged during the lockdown and even in the times to come. So AIF has set out a program which is directed at geriatric care. We trained people on the needs of the older generation or the senior people. And we trained about 120 people in Noida right now. And happily, they've got employment because of the high need. And this is something that, and of course, with a higher salary than what a normal person would get. And we are looking at scaling this up in the times to come. So what I can say is, while we are navigating through a COVID-affected world, when we see this paradigm shift in the way that skilling or entrepreneurship programs for the differently abled are being conducted, while we move from the emergency phase, we are still facing some emergencies even now, but in the times to come, in the few months ahead, I'm sure that the theme "Build Back Better" would be the mantra for us to follow. As I said, when the world is sensitized, this is the time to strike. This is the time for all of us to raise our banner, to make sure that decision makers bring in those measures that we were so desperately asking for all these years. So when we talk of a new normal, all of us will have to ensure that this new normal is a much better normal. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I think AI have been hands-on during this time of distress and have been working very closely with the disability sector on various mode, from skilling to providing relief to everything. I think more power to you. And when you say that you want to reach out to 100,000 people with disability, I think it's really brilliant. Anyway, each one of us can help. We'll be happy to do that. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
So I think very well in time, we have come to the end of this webinar. If anyone has any question to the panelists, they may put it in the chat box or they may email it to us later. Our email address will be put in the chat box by my colleague, secretariat.ncpedp@gmail.com. So I would like to extend a vote of thanks to everyone. I would like to, at the outset, I would like to thank all the panelists, Mr. Chapal Khasnavez, Radhika Alkazizi, Ravinder Singh ji, Matthew Joseph Saab, and and each one of you have taken out time on a very short notice for this webinar, and the kind of knowledge that you have shared and your perspective that you've shared on each of your theme, and you come with so much of conviction yourself. I think it will give us a lot of directions for which to work in times to come. I would like to thank Tarsadia Foundation for supporting this program, for this webinar. I would like to thank the sign language interpreter, both of them, all the participants who have joined us on Zoom and also on the YouTube and other social media channel for constantly staying. This will be recorded and also put up on our YouTube channel for people to come and refer to in future. There is a lot of work that is need to be done, and all that we have said since morning should not just remain words and has to be brought into action. And for that, all of us have to come together to build back better. And despite this time of distress, I have hopes. I have hope that all of us, the sector as a sector, can come together and really do the needful in whatever it may needs to build back better. And we constantly engage with all the stakeholders, monitor all the implementation of the policies and the laws that we have in place. So with this, with this, I would again reiterate that NCP-DP will definitely do its bid, and also happy to collaborate and join hands with anybody who's in the effort. So thank you so much, each one of you, for taking time out, and a very happy International Day for Persons with Disability once again. Thank you so much. I think this webinar has come to an end.